SuperMindz.
The Crow and the Pebble. Once upon a time, on a hot summer day, there was a thirsty crow. The crow had been flying around for a long time under the hot sun, looking for water to drink. Finally, he spotted a pitcher lying on the ground. The crow flew down to the pitcher and peered inside. He was happy to see that there was some water at the bottom. But when he tried to drink it, he found that his beak could not reach the water. The pitcher was too tall and the water was too low. The crow was very clever. He thought for a moment and then looked around. He saw some pebbles scattered on the ground nearby. The crow had an idea. He picked up a pebble with his beak and dropped it into the pitcher. The water in the pitcher rose just a little bit. The crow picked up another pebble and dropped it into the pitcher. Plop! The water rose a bit more. The crow continued to pick up pebbles one by one and drop them into the pitcher. With each pebble, the water in the pitcher rose higher and higher. The crow worked hard, picking up and dropping pebbles without stopping. He did not give up, even though it was tiring and took a long time. Finally, after dropping many pebbles into the pitcher, the water level was high enough for the crow to reach it with its beak. He happily drank the cool, refreshing water until he was no longer thirsty. The crow felt very proud of himself. He had used his clever thinking and hard work to solve the problem and get a drink of water. And so the crow flew away feeling happy and refreshed, ready for new adventures. And that's the story of the crow and the pebble. 3 Little Pigs. Once upon a time, in a peaceful and sunny meadow, there lived 3 little pigs. They were brothers who decided it was time to build their own homes and set off on their own adventures. The first little pig, who loved to play and relax, thought it would be easy to build his house out of soft, golden straw. He quickly gathered the straw and built his cozy little house. It was warm and bright, and the little pig felt very happy and safe. The second little pig, who liked to work a little harder, decided to build his house out of sturdy sticks. He spent a bit more time collecting the sticks and carefully stacking them to make his home. It wasn't as quick as the straw house, but the little pig was pleased with his work and felt snug and secure. The third little pig, who was the wisest and the most thoughtful of the 3, decided to build his house out of strong, solid bricks. He worked hard, brick by brick, until he had a beautiful red brick house. It took him the longest, but he knew his house would be very strong and safe. One day, as the sun was setting and the world was quiet and still, a big bad wolf came sneaking through the meadow. He was hungry and looking for a tasty meal. He saw the first little pig's straw house and thought it looked like an easy snack. The wolf knocked on the door and said in a deep, gruff voice, little pig, let me come in." But the first little pig, feeling brave, replied, "Not by the hair on my chinny chin chin." The wolf frowned and huffed and puffed, and with a great big blow, he blew the straw house down. The first little pig ran as fast as he could to brother's stick house. The wolf followed and knocked on the door of the stick house. He called out, little pigs, let me come in." But the two little pigs shouted back, "Not by the hairs on our chins." The wolf, growing more impatient, huffed and puffed, and with a more powerful blow, he blew the stick house down. The two little pigs squealed and scurried to their brother's brick house. The wolf, now feeling quite determined, came to the brick house and knocked on the door. Little pigs, let me come in," he demanded. But the three little pigs, safe inside the strong brick house, confidently answered, "Not by the hairs on our chins." The wolf, taking a deep breath, huffed and puffed, and he blew with all his might. But no matter how hard he tried, the brick house stood firm. The wolf blew and blew until he was out of breath. Finally, tired and frustrated, the wolf gave up and ran away, leaving the three little pigs safe and sound in their sturdy brick house. The three little pigs were so happy to be safe together. They learned a valuable lesson, that hard work and careful planning always pay off. They lived happily ever after in the strong brick house. Once upon a time, in a lush forest, there lived a clever fox and a nimble cat. The fox was very proud of how smart he was and loved to show off his many tricks. One day, the fox met the cat on a path in the forest. "Hello, cat," said the fox. "I have so many clever tricks to get away from danger. How many tricks do you know?" The cat replied modestly, "I only know one trick, but it's a good one." The fox laughed and said, "Only one? I know hundreds of tricks. You should learn some more, like me." Just then, they heard the sound of a thunderous hound barking in the distance. The fox and the cat knew the dogs were coming closer. The cat immediately sprang into action. "Goodbye, fox, this is my trick," she said, and swiftly climbed up on a tall tree, finding a safe spot among the branches. The fox, meanwhile, was thinking about which of his many tricks he should use. Should I run through the thicket, or maybe hide in a burrow? Or should I try to trick the hounds by running in circles? He could not decide. While he was busy thinking, the hounds came nearer and nearer. Before the fox could even make up his mind, the hounds arrived and caught him. The cat, safely perched in the tree, watched as the fox was taken away by the hunters. After the danger had passed, the cat climbed down from the tree and continued on her way. She thought about what had happened. She realized that sometimes having one good reliable trick is better than knowing many tricks that you can't decide between a moment of danger. From that day on, the cat was even more grateful for her one trick. And that's the story of the fox and the cat. The Gingerbread Man. Once upon a time, there was an old woman who lived in a little cottage with her husband. One day, she decided to bake a special treat. She mixed flour, sugar, and spices to make gingerbread dough. She rolled it out and cut it into shape of a little man. She gave him raisin eyes, a cinnamon candy nose, and icing for a mouth and buttons. Then she put him in the oven to bake. As she was cleaning up, she heard a little voice coming from the oven. "Let me out! Let me out!" The old woman opened the oven door, and out jumped the gingerbread man. He ran across the kitchen and out of the door, shouting, "Run, run as fast as you can! You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man!" The old woman and her husband ran after him. But the gingerbread man was too fast. He ran past a cow grazing in the field. The cow looked up and said, "Moo, you look tasty. I want to eat you." The gingerbread man laughed and said, I've run away from an old woman and an old man, and I can run away from you. I can." And he ran shouting, "Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man." The cow ran after him, but the gingerbread man was too fast. He kept running and soon passed a horse trotting along the road. The horse said, "You look delicious. I want to eat you." The gingerbread man laughed and said, "I've run away from an old woman, an old man, and a cow, and I can run away from you. I can." And he ran shouting, "Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man." The horse ran after him, but the gingerbread man was too fast. He kept running and soon reached a river. He wanted to cross but didn't know how. Just then, a sly fox came by and said, "I can help you cross the river. Just hop on my tail and I'll swim across." The gingerbread man thought for a moment and jumped onto the fox's tail. The fox began to swim across the river. After a while, the fox said, "My tail is getting tired. Jump onto my back." The gingerbread man did as he was told. As they swam further, the fox said, "My back is getting wet. Jump onto my nose." The gingerbread man did as he was told. When they were almost across the river, the fox suddenly tossed the gingerbread man into the air and snapped him up in one quick bite. And that was the end of the gingerbread man. The moral of the story is to be careful who you trust and not to be too boastful. Once upon a time, in a lively meadow, there lived a diligent ant named Andy and a carefree grasshopper named Greg. Andy the ant was a hard-working fellow. He believed in planning for the future and worked tirelessly to gather food for the upcoming winter. On the other side of the meadow, Greg the grasshopper was more interested in playing his guitar and enjoying the present moment. Andy says, "Greg, winter is coming soon. You should start preparing and gathering food." "Oh, Andy, relax. There's plenty of time. Let's enjoy the sunshine and music," said Greg. As the days grew colder, Andy had more than enough food stored in the ant hill. But poor Greg found himself hungry and cold. Greg was shivering as he said, "Andy, can you spare me some food? I did not prepare for winter, and now I'm starving." Andy said, "Greg, I warned you about preparing for winter. It's important to plan ahead." Greg realized his mistake and said, "You were right, Andy. I should have listened." And so, Greg learned the importance of hard work and planning for the future, while Andy's kindness taught him the value of compassion and understanding. The meadow flourished again in the spring, reminding everyone that a balance of hard work and enjoying the present is the key to a happy life. The Honest Woodcutter. Once upon a time, there was a hard-working woodcutter who lived in a small village. Every day he went into the forest to chop wood, which he sold in the market to earn a living. He was known throughout the village for his honesty and kindness. One day, while chopping wood near a river, the woodcutter accidentally dropped his axe into the water. The river was deep and fast, and the axe quickly sank out of sight. The woodcutter was very upset because he needed the axe to earn his living. He sat down by the riverbank and began to weep. Suddenly, the river goddess appeared before him. She had heard his cries and decided to help. "Why are you crying, good woodcutter?" she asked. The woodcutter looked up in surprise and said, I have lost my axe in the river, and I cannot do my work without it. The river goddess smiled kindly and said, Don't worry, I will help you. She dove into the water and soon emerged with a shiny golden axe. Is this your axe? She asked. The woodcutter looked at the golden axe and shook his head. No, that is not my axe, he said. Mine is just an old simple iron axe. The river goddess nodded and disappeared into the water again. This time she returned with a silver axe. Is this your axe? She asked again. The woodcutter looked at the silver axe and again shook his head. No, that is not my axe either, he said. Mine is just a plain iron axe. The river goddess smiled even warmly at his honesty. She dug into the river one more time and came back with the woodcutter's old iron axe. Is this your axe? She asked. The woodcutter's face lit up with joy. Yes, that is my axe. Thank you so much, he exclaimed. The river goddess was so pleased with the woodcutter's honesty that she gave him all 3 axes, the gold one, the silver one, and his own iron one. You have shown great honesty, she said. As a reward, you may keep all 3 axes. The woodcutter was overjoyed and thanked the river goddess for her kindness. He returned to the village and shared his story with everyone. The villagers were amazed by his honesty and the goddess' generosity. From that day on, the woodcutter continued to work hard, but now he had enough to live comfortably and help others in need. He remained honest and kind, and his story spread far and wide, teaching everyone the value of honesty. And that's the story of the honest woodcutter. Tortoise and the Hare. Once upon a time, in a peaceful meadow, there lived a speedy hare and a slow-moving tortoise. The hare was very proud of how fast he could run, and he loved to boast about it. One day, while hopping around, he said, I'm the fastest animal in the whole forest. No one can beat me in a race. The tortoise, who was very wise and calm, heard the hare's bragging and said, I may be slow, but I can still race you if you'd like. The hare laughed and said, You race me? You're so slow. You'd never even get halfway before I'd finished the race. But the hare was feeling quite confident and agreed to the race, thinking it would be an easy win. The next day, all the animals gathered to watch the big race. The hare and the tortoise lined up at the starting line. With a ready, set, go, the hare darted off like lightning, while the tortoise started at a slow, steady pace. The hare was so fast that he soon reached the finish line, but he was so sure he would win the race, so he decided to take a nap under a shady tree. I have plenty of time, he thought. I rest a little while, then finish the race. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept moving slowly but surely step by step. He did not stop or get distracted. As the hare slept soundly, the tortoise continued on his way. After a while, the hare woke up and stretched. He looked around and saw the tortoise far behind. I'll take my time getting to the finish line, he thought, feeling very confident. After a while, the hare woke up and stretched. He casually made his way to the finish line. But to his surprise, as the hare got closer, he saw that the tortoise were already near the finish line. The tortoise was moving steadily, never stopping, and soon crossed the finish line before the hare could even catch up. The crowd of animals cheered for the tortoise. The hare, feeling embarrassed, realized that he had underestimated his friend. He learned a valuable lesson. Slow and steady wins the race. The tortoise smiled and thanked the hare for the fun race. From that day on, the hare stopped bragging and respected the tortoise's steady determination. The tortoise and the hare became good friends, and they often laughed about the day when the slow-moving tortoise had won the race. And so, they lived happily ever after, always remembering that even if you're slow, being steady and determined can help you achieve your goals. The Frog Prince. Once upon a time, in a beautiful kingdom, there lived a young princess. She was kind, smart, and loved to play with her golden ball. One sunny day, the princess went to the forest near a cool, clear pond to play. As she tossed her golden ball into the air, it slipped from her fingers and fell into the deep pond. The princess sat by the pond and cried. She didn't know how to get her precious ball back. Suddenly, she heard a voice croak. "Why are you crying, princess?" She looked around and saw a small green frog sitting on a lily pad. "I lost my golden ball in the pond," she said, "and I can't reach it." The frog thought for a moment and said, "I can help you, but what will you give me in return?" The princess thought the frog was silly but said, "I'll give you anything you want, my clothes, my jewels, even my golden crown." The frog shook his head. "I don't want those things. I want you to be my friend. Let me eat from your plate and sleep in your palace." The princess thought about it. She did not believe a frog would really want to live in a palace, so she agreed. "Yes, I promise. Now please get my ball." The frog dove into the pond and after a few moments resurfaced with the golden ball. He placed it on the grass near the princess. She was so happy to have her ball back that she picked it up and ran home, forgetting all about her promise. That evening, the princess was having dinner with her father, the king, and there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, she saw the little frog. He looked up at her with the big, sad eyes and said, "Princess, you promised to be my friend. Let me in." The princess was startled and shut the door quickly. She returned to her dinner, but the king noticed that something was wrong. "What's the matter, my dear?" he asked. The princess told her father about the lost ball and her promise to the frog. The king listened carefully and said, "You must keep your promise. Let the frog in." Reluctantly, the princess opened the door, and the frog hopped inside. He sat at the table and ate from the princess' plate. After dinner, the frog said, "I'm tired. Please take me to your room so I can sleep." The princess didn't want to, but her father reminded her of her promise. She carried the frog to her room and placed him on a pillow beside her bed. The frog looked at her and said, "Good night, princess." The next morning, when the princess woke up, she was amazed to see that the frog had turned into a handsome prince. He explained that he had been under a wicked witch spell, and only a kind promise kept by a princess could break it. The prince thanked the princess for her kindness and honesty. They became good friends and spent a lot of time together. Eventually, they fell in love and were married in a grand celebration. The prince and princess lived happily ever after, and that's the story of the Frog Prince. Puss in Boots. Once upon a time, there was a miller who had 3 sons. When the miller passed away, he left his mill to the oldest son, his donkey to the middle, and his cat to the youngest son. The youngest son was disappointed. "What am I going to do with just a cat?" he wondered. The cat, who was very clever, overheard his master and said, "Do not worry, master. Just give me a pair of boots and a sack, and I will make you rich." The young man was curious and decided to trust the cat. He gave him the boots and the sack, and the cat put them on, looking quite fancy. Puss in Boots, as the cat was now called, set off into the forest. He filled the sack with some fresh vegetables and grains and laid it on the ground. Then he hid nearby. Soon, a rabbit came by and hopped into the sack to eat the food. Puss quickly pulled the strings and captured the rabbit. He took the rabbit to the king's castle. "Your Majesty," said Puss, bowing deeply, "I bring you a gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas." The king was pleased and accepted the gift. Puss continued to catch game and present it to the king, always saying it was from his master, the Marquis of Carabas. One day, Puss in Boots learned that the king and his daughter, the beautiful princess, were going to take a ride by the water. Puss hurried to his master and said, "Master, if you follow my advice, your fortune is made. Just go and bathe in the river at the place I will show you, and leave the rest to me." The young man did as Puss asked. While he was bathing, Puss hid his master's clothes under a rock. As the king's carriage approached, Puss ran up to it shouting, "Help! Help! My master, the Marquis of Carabas, is drowning!" The king, recognizing Puss, ordered his guards to rescue the young man. Puss explained that while his master was bathing, thieves had stolen his clothes. The king immediately ordered fine clothes to be brought for the Marquis of Carabas. When the young man was dressed in the splendid clothes, he looked so handsome that the princess fell in love with him at once. The king invited the young man to join them in the carriage. Puss ran ahead and saw some peasants working in a field. "If anyone asks you," he said, "tell them that this land belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, or you will be chopped into little pieces." The peasants were frightened and agreed. When the king passed by, he asked the peasants whose land it was, and they answered, "It belongs to the Marquis of Carabas." The king was very impressed at the vast lands of the Marquis of Carabas. Finally, Puss arrived at the grand castle owned by a wicked ogre who could transform himself into any creature he wished. "I have heard," said Puss, "that you can change into any animal you desire. I am very impressed. Can you show me?" The ogre, pleased to show off, turned into a huge lion. Puss acted frightened and said, "That is very impressive, but can you also turn into something small like a mouse?" The ogre, waiting to show his full power, changed into a tiny mouse. Quick as a flash, Puss pounced on the mouse and ate him up. With the ogre gone, Puss claimed the castle for his master. When the king arrived at the castle, he was amazed by its grandeur. "Welcome to the castle of my master, the Marquis of Carabas." The king, impressed by the young man's wealth and the cat's cleverness, offered his daughter's hand in marriage. The young man and the princess were married and lived happily ever after. And that's the story of Puss in Boots. The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, in a quiet countryside, there was a lovely little pond. Near this pond, a mother duck was waiting for her eggs to hatch. One by one, the eggs began to crack open, and out came fluffy yellow ducklings. The mother duck was very happy to see her new babies. But there was one egg that was different from the others. It was bigger and took longer to hatch. Finally, it cracked open and out came a big gray duckling. He was not like his brothers and sisters at all. He was bigger and his feathers were not yellow but gray. The other ducklings looked at him and called him the Ugly Duckling. As the days went by, the Ugly Duckling tried to join in the fun with the other ducklings, but they always teased him and told him they didn't belong. Even the other animals on the farm made fun of him. They said, "You're so ugly, go away." The poor Ugly Duckling felt very sad and lonely. One day, he could not take it anymore and decided to run away. He left the farm and wandered through the countryside, looking for a place where he could fit in. He came across a pond and saw some beautiful white birds swimming gracefully. They were swans. The Ugly Duckling thought they were the most beautiful birds he had ever seen, but he felt even more sad because he was so different. Winter came and the Ugly Duckling had to find shelter to survive the cold. He hid in a thicket, shivering and hungry. It was a tough time, but he managed to make it through the long, cold winter. When spring finally arrived, the Ugly Duckling emerged from his hiding place and made his way back to the pond. He was so tired and weak. As he bent down to drink some water, he saw his reflection in the pond and was amazed. He was no longer a gray, ugly duckling. He had grown into a beautiful swan. The other swans saw him and swam over. They welcomed him warmly and told him how beautiful he was. The Ugly Duckling could not believe it. He spread his wings and realized that he had always been a swan. He just didn't know it. He joined the other swans and felt so happy to be accepted and loved. He swam gracefully with his new friends, feeling proud and confident. And so, the Ugly Duckling, who was now a beautiful swan, lived happily ever after. The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, in a quiet countryside, there was a lovely little pond. Near this pond, a mother duck was waiting for her eggs to hatch. One by one, the eggs began to crack open, and out came fluffy yellow ducklings. The mother duck was very happy to see her new babies. But there was one egg that was different from the others. It was bigger and took longer to hatch. Finally, it cracked open and out came a big gray duckling. He was not like his brothers and sisters at all. He was bigger and his feathers were not yellow but gray. The other ducklings looked at him and called him the Ugly Duckling. As the days went by, the Ugly Duckling tried to join in the fun with the other ducklings, but they always teased him and told him they didn't belong. Even the other animals on the farm made fun of him. They said, "You're so ugly, go away." The poor Ugly Duckling felt very sad and lonely. One day, he could not take it anymore and decided to run away. He left the farm and wandered through the countryside, looking for a place where he could fit in. He came across a pond and saw some beautiful white birds swimming gracefully. They were swans. The Ugly Duckling thought they were the most beautiful birds he had ever seen, but he felt even more sad because he was so different. Winter came and the Ugly Duckling had to find shelter to survive the cold. He hid in a thicket, shivering and hungry. It was a tough time, but he managed to make it through the long, cold winter. When spring finally arrived, the Ugly Duckling emerged from his hiding place and made his way back to the pond. He was so tired and weak. As he bent down to drink some water, he saw his reflection in the pond and was amazed. He was no longer a gray, ugly duckling. He had grown into a beautiful swan. The other swans saw him and swam over. They welcomed him warmly and told him how beautiful he was. The Ugly Duckling could not believe it. He spread his wings and realized that he had always been a swan. He just didn't know it. He joined the other swans and felt so happy to be accepted and loved. He swam gracefully with his new friends, feeling proud and confident. And so, the ugly duckling, who was now a beautiful swan, lived happily ever after. The Ant and the Dove. One sunny afternoon, a little ant was busy searching for food in the forest. After working hard all day, she felt very thirsty and decided to take a drink from a nearby stream. As she leaned over the edge of the water, she lost her balance and fell in. The water was too strong for her tiny legs, and she was being swept away, struggling to stay above the surface. A dove sitting on a branch above the stream saw the ant in trouble. Feeling very sorry for her, the dove plucked a big leaf from the tree and dropped it into the water. The leaf floated so close to the ant, who quickly climbed onto it. The leaf carried her safely to the shore, and the ant was able to crawl out of the water. The ant looked up at the dove and with great attitude waving her little legs to say thank you before heading back home. She never forgot the dove's kindness and hoped to return the favor one day, even though she was so small. A few days later, the ant was wandering near the same tree where the dove lived. As she walked, she noticed a man sneaking through the bushes holding a gun. The ant looked up and saw the man was aiming at the dove, who was sitting quietly in the tree unaware of the danger. The ant knew she had to act fast to save the dove. She ran over to the man and crawled up his leg. Just as he was about to fire the gun, the ant bit his foot hard. The man cried out in pain and dropped his gun. The noise startled the dove, who flew away to safety, unaware of how close she had been to danger. The ant felt proud that she had helped Dove, just like the dove had once saved her. Even though she was small, she had made a big difference. The moral of the story is that kindness is always repaid, no matter how small you are. The Ant and the Dove. One sunny afternoon, a little ant was busy searching for food in the forest. After working hard all day, she felt very thirsty and decided to take a drink from a nearby stream. As she leaned over the edge of the water, she lost her balance and fell in. The water was too strong for her tiny legs, and she was being swept away, struggling to stay above the surface. A dove sitting on a branch above the stream saw the ant in trouble. Feeling very sorry for her, the dove plucked a big leaf from the tree and dropped it into the water. The leaf floated so close to the ant, who quickly climbed onto it. The leaf carried her safely to the shore, and the ant was able to crawl out of the water. The ant looked up at the dove and with great attitude waving her little legs to say thank you before heading back home. She never forgot the dove's kindness and hoped to return the favor one day, even though she was so small. A few days later, the ant was wandering near the same tree where the dove lived. As she walked, she noticed a man sneaking through the bushes holding a gun. The ant looked up and saw the man was aiming at the dove, who was sitting quietly in the tree unaware of the danger. The ant knew she had to act fast to save the dove. She ran over to the man and crawled up his leg. Just as he was about to fire the gun, the ant bit his foot hard. The man cried out in pain and dropped his gun. The noise startled the dove, who flew away to safety, unaware of how close she had been to danger. The ant felt proud that she had helped Dove, just like the dove had once saved her. Even though she was small, she had made a big difference. The moral of the story is that kindness is always repaid, no matter how small you are. The Lion and the Mouse. Once upon a time, in a dense jungle, there lived a mighty lion. He was the king of the jungle and all the animals respected him. One day, after a big meal, the lion lays down under a shady tree to take a nap. While the lion was sleeping, a little mouse was scurrying about, looking for food. By accident, the mouse ran across the lion's paw, waking him up. The lion grabbed the mouse with his big paw and held him tight. The little mouse was very scared. He begged the lion, "Please, mighty lion, let me go. If you spare my life, I promise to help you one day." The lion laughed. "You help me? You're so small, how could you ever help me?" But the lion was feeling kind that day and decided to let the mouse go. "All right, little mouse, I'll let you go. Just be more careful next time." The mouse thanked the lion and scampered away as fast as he could. A few days later, the lion was walking through the jungle when he caught himself in a hunter's net. He roared and struggled to free himself, but the more he tried, the tighter the net became. The lion's powerful roars echoed through the jungle, but none of the animals dared to come near. The little mouse heard the lion's roars and remembered the kind act of the lion. He quickly ran to where the lion was trapped. The mouse saw the lion struggling and said, "Don't worry, mighty lion, I will help you." With his sharp little teeth, the mouse began to gnaw at the ropes of the net. He worked quickly and steadily, and soon he had chewed it through enough of the ropes to free the lion. He was free. The lion looked down at the tiny mouse and said, "Thank you, little mouse. I see now that even a small friend can be a great help." The mouse smiled and replied, "I promised to help you, and I'm glad I could keep my promise." From that day on, the lion and the mouse became good friends. The lion learned that even the smallest creatures can make a big difference. And the mouse learned that kindness is always rewarded. And so, they lived happily ever after in the jungle. The Fox and the Stork. Once upon a time, there was a clever fox who loved to play tricks on others. He was proud of his cunning ways and often boasted about how no one could outsmart him. One day, he decided to invite his friend, the stork, to dinner. The stork, with her long legs and beak, happily accepted the fox's invitation. She arrived at the fox's home with great anticipation. The fox, with a sly grin, served the soup in shallow bowls, knowing full well that the stork wouldn't be able to eat from them. The fox lapped up the soup quickly with his tongue, but the poor stork could only wet the tip of her beak in the shallow dish. "Don't you like the soup, my dear? You hardly seem to be eating anything." The stork, realizing the fox's trick, was calm but hungry. She politely thanked the fox and left without a word. However, she decided to teach the fox a lesson. A few days later, the stork invited the fox to her home for dinner. The fox, eager for a meal, accepted the invitation. When he arrived, the stork served the meal in tall, narrow jars with long necks. The stork easily slipped her long beak into the jar and enjoyed her meal, while the fox couldn't fit his snout into the jar at all. He licked the outside of the jar in frustration, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get to the food. "Enjoying your meal, dear friend?" asked the stork with a mischievous glint in her eye. The fox, realizing that the stork had played the same trick on him, was embarrassed and hungry. He admitted that he had been wrong to trick the stork and learned an important lesson that day. The moral of the story is that treat others the way you want to be treated. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who always wore a red hooded cape that her grandmother had made for her. Because of this, everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother packed a basket with goodies like bread, cheese, and a little cake. She said to Little Red Riding Hood, "Your grandmother is not feeling well. Take this basket to her and remember to stay on the path. Don't talk to strangers and be careful." Little Red Riding Hood happily set off through forest, excited to visit her grandmother. As she walked, she admired the beautiful flowers and listened to the birds singing. Suddenly, a big bad wolf appeared from behind a tree. The wolf, with his big sharp teeth and big eyes, looked at Little Red Riding Hood and asked, "Where are you going, little girl?" Little Red Riding Hood, forgetting her mother's warning, answered politely, "I'm going to visit my grandmother who is sick. She lives in a cottage on the other side of the forest." The wolf's eyes gleamed with a sly plan. He smiled and said, "Why don't you pick some flowers for your grandmother? She would love that." Little Red Riding Hood thought this was a wonderful idea. So she wandered off the path to gather some bright, colorful flowers. While Little Red Riding Hood was busy picking flowers, the cunning wolf ran straight to the grandmother's cottage. He knocked on the door and called out in a sweet voice, "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood." The grandmother, who was in bed, thought her granddaughter had arrived and said, "Come in, my dear." The wolf quickly entered the cottage. Before the grandmother could realize it was the wolf, he gobbled her up in one big gulp. Then he put on her nightgown and cap and lay down in her bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. He even put on her glasses to complete the disguise. A little while later, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at the cottage, carrying her basket of goodies and a bouquet of flowers. She knocked on the door and heard a voice that sounded a bit strange, but she didn't think of anything of it. "Come in, dear," the voice said. Little Red Riding Hood entered the cottage and went to her grandmother's bedside. She noticed that her grandmother looked very different. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "The better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf in a gruff voice. "Grandmother, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf, inching closer. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have," exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood, now very curious. "The better to eat you with," roared the wolf. Throwing off the covers, he leapt out of the bed and gobbled up Little Red Riding Hood in one swift bite. Luckily, a huntsman was passing by the cottage, who heard the strange sounds and suspected something was wrong. He entered the house and found the wolf fast asleep in the grandmother's bed. His belly was round and full. The huntsman knew what had happened. He took out his knife and carefully cut open the wolf's stomach. Out came Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, alive and unharmed. The huntsman filled the wolf's belly with heavy stone and stitched it back up. When the wolf woke up, he tried to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed and died. They thanked the huntsman for his bravery and shared the food from Little Red Riding Hood's basket. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood promised to always listen to her mother and never stray from the path. And that's the story of Little Red Riding Hood. The Clever Little Rabbit. Once upon a time, in a lush green forest, there was a clever rabbit named Benny. Benny was known throughout the forest for his quick thinking and clever ideas. One day, the animals in the forest heard terrible news. A fierce lion named Leo had come to live in their forest and was scaring everyone. Leo the lion was very strong and very hungry. He roared loudly and said, "I will eat one of you every day until I am full." The animals were very frightened. They gathered together and decided that they needed a plan to deal with Leo. They all agreed that someone should go and speak to the lion to find a way to save the forest. Benny the rabbit stepped forward and said, "I will go talk to Leo. I will use my cleverness to come up with a plan." The animals were worried but knew Benny was their best hope. Benny hopped off to the lion's den. When he arrived, Leo was lounging comfortably and looking quite pleased with himself. "Hello, Leo," Benny said bravely. "I am here to talk to you about your plan to eat the animals." Leo, who was very hungry, replied, "Yes, I am going to eat one animal a day until I am full. Do you have a problem with that?" Benny thought quickly and said, "Actually, I do have a problem, but I also have a solution. You see, there is another lion in the forest who claims to be even stronger and more powerful than you." Leo's eyes widened with interest. "Really? Where is this lion? I would like to meet him." Benny replied, "I can take you to him, but you must promise not to eat any animals until after you meet this lion." Leo agreed, eager to prove he was the strongest lion in the forest. Benny led Leo to a deep, dark well. Benny pointed to the well and said, "Look down there. That is where the other lion lives." Leo peered into the well and saw his own reflection in the water. The lion's face looked very fierce and strong, and Leo thought it was the other lion. He roared loudly at his reflection, and the reflection roared back at him, echoing his own roar. Leo was startled and frightened. He thought the other lion was challenging him and was very powerful. He quickly backed away from the well, feeling scared. Benny took advantage of Leo's fear and said, "I see that you're afraid of this other lion. Maybe you should leave our forest and find another place to live." Leo, still frightened, agreed to leave the forest immediately. He hurried away, not wanting to face the other lion again. The animals in the forest were overjoyed and thanked Benny for his cleverness. They all lived happily and peacefully, remembering the lesson that sometimes cleverness and bravery can save the day. And that's the story of the clever rabbit. The Greedy Mouse. Once upon a time, there was a little mouse who was always hungry. No matter how much food he had, he always wanted more. One day, while wandering around, the mouse found a basket full of corn. His eyes gleamed with excitement. "Oh, what a feast!" the mouse squeaked. Without thinking twice, he squeezed through a small hole in the basket and began to eat the corn hungrily. He ate and ate until his belly was round and full. When the mouse finally decided he had enough, he waddled over to the hole to leave. But to his surprise, his belly was now too big. He tried squeezing through the hole again and again, but he was stuck inside the basket. "Oh no!" cried the mouse. "What am I going to do?" Just then, a rabbit happened to hop by and saw the mouse stuck in the basket. "What's wrong?" asked the rabbit. "I ate too much corn and now I'm stuck," the mouse replied miserably. The rabbit shook his head and said, "You'll just have to wait until your belly shrinks. Only then you'll be able to fit through the hole." The mouse nodded but couldn't help feeling hungry as he waited. So, instead of being patient, the greedy mouse nibbled a little more corn, thinking it wouldn't hurt. Suddenly, while the mouse was busy stuffing his face, a shadow loomed over the basket. It was a cat, prowling nearby, drawn by the smell of corn and the sound of nibbling. The cat peeked inside the basket and spotted the fat, trapped mouse. "Well, well, well," purred the cat. "What do we have here? A tasty little mouse who's too greedy for his own good." Before the mouse could react, the cat pounced, eating him up in one swift bite. So, the moral of the story is that the greed can lead to dangerous consequences, and if you're not careful, it might just catch up to you when you least expect it. The Raven and the Swan. Once upon a time, there was a raven who was very proud of his intelligence, but deep down he wished he looked more beautiful. One day, while flying over a lake, he saw a swan gracefully gliding across the water. The swan's feathers were pure white, and the sunlight made them gleam like snow. The raven, whose own feathers were jet black, couldn't help but feel envious. "How beautiful that swan is," the raven thought to himself. "I wish my feathers were as white as his. Maybe then everyone would admire me too." Convinced that it was the swan's lifestyle that made him so beautiful, the raven decided to live by the lake and eat the same food as the swan. He stopped eating his usual diet of small animals and instead tried to live on plants and pond weeds, just like the swan. Days passed, and despite all his efforts, the raven's feathers remained black as ever. Worse still, he grew thinner and weaker because the new food didn't suit him at all. One day, after struggling to find anything to eat, the raven finally realized his mistake. "I was foolish to try to change what I am," he thought. "No matter what I do, I will always be a raven, and I should be proud of that." With a heavy heart, the raven flew back to his old home, realizing that true beauty comes from accepting yourself for who you are and not from trying to be someone else. So, the moral of the story is that it is better to be content with who you are than to envy others and change yourself to be like them.